Okay, so in Blender 2.8, Grease Pencil finally got modifiers. It's a good news for all of us because it's definitely less amount of modifiers than you normally have in Blender, but most of them are super exciting. Let's start with Mirror because I think Mirror is the one that is like really creative one. So basically, uh, it's pretty straightforward. It just mirrors around, like you can have mirrors in different axes and stuff like that. But I usually use mirror as a design tool, right? For example, I can just make a couple of scribbles, bum like this, right? And then I can start moving things around and seeing different shapes. So like, let's say if I'm doing a creature design or like a character or something, like mirror is definitely a great thing to have. Like for example, let's say if I'm think like a knight or something. Right? Like all of those things, like having it on mirror helps me a lot to kind of just save my time. And once again, I'm going very sketchy because I know like later on I can set it on layers and just change it. And go like this. So, and then I go to layers, I set it on transparency, use and refine it. So mirror is a good thing, like basically symmetry is a good thing just to concentrate on design. But you would say, well, we have mirror in Photoshop, right? Already, why would you use it in Blender? And the reason why I'm using it in Blender, because in Blender, every stroke you put is a 3D stroke, right? So for example, if I go into edit mode, and in order to view this mirror while you're editing things, you need to go over here and click this button. So, and in editing mode, you have two, vertex mode and line mode. So if you click on line mode, now you basically, you can move things around, right? Like you can start extruding parts. It's basically the similar workflow that you would do in VR, but obviously, like I said in my previous tutorial, VR is very early days right now. It doesn't have all the tools that Blender already has. So hopefully like this kind of workflow will definitely migrate to VR at some point, because it's just navigating in VR is so much simpler. But since it's not there yet, Blender is definitely helping a lot to kind of move very smoothly from 2D design towards 3D. So now, like you see, like I did those like very sloppy lines, but this allows me to basically get the perspective. That's what I was saying in my introduction, right? How can I draw something and then not worry about perspective, right? It's not like I'm afraid of perspective. I know perspective quite well, but when you're working on projects, sometimes you don't have time to deal with all that stuff. And this is where people use 3D, but always just like as I was discussing before, like 3D takes a lot of time to set up, right? Like some things are just so much simpler and easier to draw. And as you can see, like I keep extruding these things, you know, I can just keep and this is slowly becoming a fully realized. Like the more I work on it, the more perspective I will have. Something like this. And I can still draw, you know, like let's say if I want to draw this sword, right? I can just go into drawing mode and I can basically finish the sword. Bam. But obviously, as you can see, this is like way off. There are two ways you can do it. Either you move things afterwards, like this, or you can start using this guy over here, the stroke placement. So if you go to 3D cursor and It's really hard to see in the white background, but if I double click, make sure you double click. You set the cursor, but obviously this cursor doesn't snap because there is no surface. You have to do it twice. So top view, side view, boom. And now whenever you draw something, let's say I draw this sword. And by the way, if I press Ctrl, it creates like straight lines. You see, it creates it exactly as where I want it to be. So, I mean, doing this knight would be probably too ambitious because there's too much, but still, it's doable. You can create like a fully three-dimensional object just made out of lines. And because with your perspective later on, when you want to do like a drawing, it will serve as a guide, right? Instead of, imagine if you were using 3D as a guide, you had to model everything. It just takes so much time, you know. Here you designed your guy very quickly, and now you're able, if you're using it for your action illustration, right? You can go, or you can like set up an angle, and then, oops, and then you can go into object mode and then create a new one. And then in this new one, you already see the perspective. It's not perfect, but it's a good solid start. It's better than nothing, right? And I will show you way more complete example where I place those strokes perfectly. But for this one, I'm just gonna show you how like even just like a very quick thing helped me a lot. So the question here is, am I just using this for kind of perspective? No, I'm using this to design it first, and then straight away from there, based on my design, I can just move on and start creating all those like different angles, right? So if I was in Photoshop, how would it be different? If I was in Photoshop, I would use like symmetry to design my character, and then I use purely my knowledge to rotate the camera angle, right? It's great, but when you don't have time, or sometimes you don't have a skill to do that, like I know many artists, they're good designers, but they're not very good at drawing and stuff like that. So this definitely grease pencil saves a lot of time. Look at this. So based on our character, yes, this second character is very flat, but it doesn't matter. It just gave us a good idea, right? I'm gonna save this one and open a way more advanced example, which you can watch the time lapse of. But it's basically, so I created this mask, and it was fully created from scratch, just me doing a flat on version, and then extruding the lines, adding like a line weight and stuff like that to different places. And now you see it's full on 3D, which is super cool. I mean, you can see through, but it doesn't really bother me. If I want to do an illustration like of these guys, like several of these guys, look at this. I already have a bunch of those. So each one of those has, like, let's just hide these guys. Yeah. Like, it helps so much with the perspective. It's just crazy. Like, and it literally took me 5 minutes to design a flat on the version, and then by moving those lines I was able to extrude and to create this 3D dimensional kind of representation of it. And as a final result, obviously, I think if I go here, yeah, as a final result I was able to do this full-on illustration. So it saved me so much time, you know, like getting all these weird angles could be very challenging if you don't have a 3D base. But obviously doing a 3D base is another task, right? You can design a quick drawing, but modeling those things could take a day or two, and often you don't have time, or if not time, often you just want to see if your design works very quickly in 3D, and you don't want to spend like hours and hours of modeling. And this kind of approach definitely would save a lot of time. So that's one use of mirror modifier, you know. I use it for characters, I use it for like silhouettes or something like that. But then there are a few other things that I wanted to show you, and hopefully I will do it in the next chapter.